Boris, is it?
Yes.
How long have you been with High Speed Rail?
I've been with High Speed Rail since 2011. I've been in this particular role for about 18 months.
18 months. Bless you. My answer is no, in some. High Speed Rail has been I don't know how many meetings. You say public meetings. I'd like you to go back and count those public meetings. It'll blow your mind as to how many public meetings High Speed Rail has had through the years with elected officials throughout San Mateo County. What can you tell me about the Millbrae station?
In terms of what area of Millbrae? I mean, that's
no.
off topic,
I mean, right. Millbrae is the largest intermodal center west of the Mississippi. Okay, the original plan from High Speed Rail was to have that underground. You have that plan. That is the only plan that is actually going to work. And for years, the wasted money that High Speed Rail has had. I held meetings here when Mr. Musey and all these developments were happening. Is High Speed Rail here? You guys have said nothing. These partnership meetings, nothing has happened. San Mateo County, you're offering one alternative, another alternative, none of which will work in San Mateo County. We want High Speed Rail. We've always wanted High Speed Rail. But we will not settle for this second-class, cheap way of going about it. You have to reach 110 miles an hour, and you have to, by law, Millbrae is a stop. We get that, and we've welcomed that throughout. That station needs to be underground. No way, no other way is it's going to work. Okay? You present these alternatives, and we will comment, I believe, formally, to say that is not acceptable. You need to go back to your original plan where years ago I sat with your engineers. That was the original plan. Have it underground. Make it a station which connects with the largest regional airport and 50 million travelers, soon to be 70 million travelers. You talk about an intermodal study. I've never seen that. Where is this study? We have station access problems already. In order, safety modifications. The only safety we're going to have in San Mateo County is that if this is underground. The national transportation agencies, New York, D.C., Boston, everything's underground. I don't know why we waste our time and years of discussion here, going back and forth. This was originally planned for underground. It needs to be underground. You're not going to rip up downtown San Mateo, downtown Redwood City for this. It will work if it's underground. It will be safer underground. You talk about modernizing grade crossings. That's great. We have a ton of them. We would love to see that. But for this to be safe, it needs to be, again, underground. Staff recommended. Okay, we've been recommending to your staff and to High Speed Rail for, over 10 years. We recommend stuff. It goes nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. We will put it in writing what we think and we know will work and be safe instead of wasting decades of money on these so-called intermodal study. Again, this is the largest intermodal center west of the Mississippi. It has to include Caltrain, BART, SFO, corporate shuttles, everything. You're not going to get it to stop there in a safe way. Your train is too long. It takes practically the whole distance of the city of Millbrae to make that happen. We talk all around each other. System performance is key. System performance would be highest service would be underground. The community factors. We talk and we talk and we talk, and you offer two alternatives which are not acceptable to, I think, anybody in San Mateo County. The downtown in San Mateo is this big, and you're talking about like passing tracks and things like that. I'm sorry. I don't know how many years of meetings I had to sit through, and nothing, Boris, got to the board.
Can I answer at least a few?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You can answer.
I'll do my best to cover at least a number of them, because one is the underground station. We can also talk about the other downtowns and parts of the corridor that I think is worth having that discussion as well. So when we were looking at the dedicated system, so just a separate set of lines for high-speed rail, we had looked at a station configuration that had one of the 4 tracks underground. When partially that was to serve the station, partially that was also because we were looking at a dedicated system that meant grade separating everything south, including all those grade crossings through Burlingame, having to be grade separated. So one of those options that was looked at was an underground option. When we went to the blended system, so sharing the corridor and the tracks with Caltrain, we are not looking to build that infrastructure, and so the designs changed at that time to be looking at the options that we've now developed over time, including looking at a range of passing tracks, not just the one that we ended up studying in more detail, but there was lots of different options that were looked at together with Caltrain over that time, looking at the design of the station that's continued to advance from at the Millbrae location, and that's kind of the process that we've gone through. In terms of the particular issues that you're raising about other downtowns, that's, I think, partly why we're going with the blended system and looking to share tracks with Caltrain is exactly because of the issue that you raised, in that when we proposed fully dedicated separate tracks, there was massive reaction from communities because lots of the corridor is already largely built out, and it's very hard to find space for additional tracks. We get that. That was the impetus for the blended system to begin with. That's why when we're going in downtown San Mateo, for example, we're not proposing to make many changes at all. It's basically the existing corridor through there and the electrification that Caltrain is installing today. Sorry, I'll wrap up in just a second. The passing track that we're looking at in alternative B, which is again not the staff recommendation, but it is the one that we're studying, starts south of downtown when you get to the part of the corridor that starts to get past all of those grade crossings in downtown San Mateo, and then stretches to Redwood City, that is largely already on viaduct and other structures that are being built, including at 25th Avenue. So, hi, John.
Councilwoman Schneider.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a series of questions. You can give short responses. I think what you just said points out my reservations about the project. I want high-speed rail. Honestly, I do. But when other communities said no, you listened to them. When we said what we wanted, you did not. And that's the same for every other transportation agency here. You haven't listened to us. You have treated us as if anything can go here and that we have no voice in the matter. When the governor came out with his statement, I wrote a letter with the city letterhead and never even got a response. Now, I'm only one person, but I am an elected official where one of the stations are supposed to go and not even a response. That's insulting. I represent 23,000, in future 28,000 people here. So how can we expect you to be a good partner when the governor comes out with a misspoke, maybe, and yet it had a huge ramification on us? That's not a good partnership. So I am very hesitant to anything you say. So like Councilman Pappen, even though I wasn't around in those days, I'm in favor of undergrounding. I am not in favor of giving any transportation agency any more inch of Millbrae. We're 3 square miles. We don't have inches to give you. We cannot be your fallback for cheap programs and cheap planning. On top of that, I'm the representative to the Airport Noise Roundtable. I recently discovered that during their EIR on a freeway expansion or a runway expansion closer to Millbrae, not one other community partner mentioned the noise impacts. So now you're going to be adding 4 trains and 6 trains, plus more this, plus more that. All of that becomes ambient noise, of which the airport can now put noise on top of. And enough is enough. All of your transportation agencies, you're going to be running more trains. We're not even a quiet zone. We have 1 at-grade car passing and 1 at-grade pedestrian passing, and most likely you haven't talked at all about undergrounding or overpassing either of those. So all of those train whistles, almost constant train whistles will be coming through Millbrae. And you add that to the airport, and you add that to the 101 expansions, and you add it to the managed lane. The other thing that we have recently discovered is each one of your transportation agencies, every time you've come here, you've cut down trees. And it turns out that trees are one of the few remediation tools for actually absorbing low-frequency noise. So even as you build your things, you make us into one huge noise. I don't know what to say. Just so many noises. Enough is enough. So I am a no vote too at this point. I don't want to be a no vote, but you, all of you collectively, have treated us poorly, and I've had it.
Okay, so...
And I'm going to add one more thing. You want our one of the last remaining historic train stations in the entire system. You want us to move it where? Into Burlingame?
No, it's the real... So, okay, let me... First, on the letter that you wrote, I apologize. I haven't... I'll take the mea culpa. I have not seen your letter. I would have loved to have read it.
It was the day after the governor made his announcement.
So I will ask our... I don't know if you sent that to Sacramento or to our regional office, but I'll ask to
Sacramento.
find it. Okay, so I'll look to find that letter. So I apologize that I hadn't seen it. That's on us, and we should have gotten your response. On the noise issue in particular, that is something that we are going to be studying intensely in the environmental process.
Please, don't go there. And for the public, the reason they say they're going to study it is certain noises you cannot remediate. You cannot remediate low-frequency noise. And high-frequency noise you can only remediate by changes in technology of the airplanes. I don't know about the trains. So don't say that you're going to talk about it and then just say it's an issue that you cannot fix. Because we've had enough of that here.
Sorry, I'm just to try to answer the question, or at least respond to the comment, that the noise level from electric trains is generally lower than the diesel trains that are out there today. That's a starting point. That's not the end point. For us, we look at a range of mitigation options that if we have a severe set of noise impacts, so for example, that might happen in the neighborhood north of the station, partly one of the inputs that we've had to date is how do we avoid impacts to that community, and so that's why we've designed the tracks to stay within the rail corridor. Now, we're going to be close to those folks, and so we're going to be looking at, is there a sound wall that's needed? Are there changes to, for example, window treatments or other things that are needed to dampen that noise impact from the trains passing by? So all of that analysis will be in the draft environmental documents. That's coming at the next stage. Go ahead.
So in practice, when the electrification process started, because Millbrae didn't have a different tree ordinance, we got a one-on-one tree replacement. Again, this is a partnership and a place of trust. When it's a one-on-one replacement and Burlingame got a 2-to-1 or a 4-to-1, where's the trust?
I mean, I can't speak for the mitigations that Caltrain had on the electrification project. So I don't know the details of that. We can certainly, partly the reason that we released the draft environmental document and go out for public comment.
Boris, can you speak closer to the mic, please?
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Part of the reason that we have we release the draft environmental documents and go out and get public comment and input on those is specifically on these kinds of issues where we can then look towards customizing for specific communities and specific areas that might have different preferences.
Okay, then why are you having 3 open houses in Santa Clara County and 1 open house in San Mateo County and it's from Redwood City? Again, doesn't stand up for what you're saying. We're a high-speed rail station, and you want the people of Millbrae to drive all the heck down to Redwood City to talk about what's going to happen here.
Okay.
And I went to that meeting last month. When you had the meeting here in Millbrae, you had it the same night as a council meeting. So where is the working with us?
So we try to vary where in the region we have these meetings. The reason that we're having the open house in Redwood City is particularly because that's one of the locations of the passing track. And so when we're talking about the differentiating factors at this stage in the process, when we're looking at the alternatives, that's one of the key factors. That's why we scheduled a meeting there. We have had a series of meetings here. We're happy to come back again. That wasn't the only time that we've been here, but we're happy to host here, and we try to rotate around the region. When we only were here, we were being told by the Redwood City City Council, well, you guys are never in the south part of the county, so we try to alternate and vary. in terms of Santa Clara County, the range of alternatives that's the overlap between the two project sections. So we have sort of the southern part of the county that's in San Francisco, San Jose, the northern part of the county in San Francisco, San Jose. We have the southern part of the county and a lot of variation between San Jose and Gilroy in terms of the alternatives in that project section. There's differences between them, and so we have a focus in San Jose because there's lots of issues there that we've continued to engage with that community, but there's also issues in the southern part of the county, so that's why we have 3 different groups in that region. For San Mateo County, we have one group that focuses on and then rotates between the different locations.
Okay, let me ask, is there any questions on this side?
I'll make a comment.
Councilwoman Leyva.
So I'm happy I'm not you, but I wish I was, actually. I think
You look a lot more comfortable.
Well, okay, so yeah, it's very uncomfortable because we all really want to make this happen, but I think what you're hearing from my council people here that I work with is that we want to make this work, and we feel that Millbury is very special, and you haven't made us feel special. So the fact that we get this presentation that was like, 100 miles an hour, and not considering anything that we have inputted in it, I have to agree with the councilwomen on the end here, Councilmember Pappen and Schneider, that we want it underground. How can you make this happen for us? And the fact that, because you heard from Redwood City or you heard from North and South, that's like so, hit them all. We're as special as they are, and we're as important as the rest of them, and we want to be heard.
Well, they're all saying the same thing, it's just not being heard.
Yeah.
I don't disagree. That's partly why we're here.
So I'll start it again. I wish I was you, because if there's a solution, there's no problem. Figure out the solution for us, please.
Vice Mayor Holliver.
Well, first of all, thank you for coming tonight. I know you have a tough job, but I certainly want high-speed rail to work out for Millbury. I think it certainly would bring a lot to our community. But the way that it's currently designed, I don't think is acceptable, especially if you look at slide 29, the fact that our whole TOD1 area is now a parking lot. I think the scale of the station itself is far larger than it would need to be. Even if those tracks are above ground, I wouldn't see why the station has to extend almost all the way to El Camino there. So that the way it's designed now, first of all, it disregards our development projects that we've been working on for several years now, and I know you've been aware of, and I know we've had discussions with your team about that. But that's just completely disregarded here. That's an important economic, development area for our city. Another thing to consider, even, I know undergrounding, that's very expensive. At one point I heard an estimate of $1 billion per mile, which is astronomical. But, BART has 3 tracks, and they do not need 3 tracks at the Millbury station. They use predominantly use one track. They now have airport service on a 2nd track. The 3rd track is pretty much never used. So, I'm disappointed they haven't looked at other alternatives, such as, seeing if BART can give up maybe 1 track. That way you'd only have to add 1 new track instead of 2 new tracks to really reduce the impact. But as I see it, there's no reason why the footprint of the station should be anywhere close to as big as it's being presented here. It's a huge station as it is now, and there's a lot of empty space in that station. It's it's not a Grand Central Station or anything like that.
Yeah, I think for sort of way to look at the footprint, the way to look at the footprint of the station is there's 3 key components to that equation. There's the tracks and platforms themselves. That's sort of frankly the must-have to be able to serve the station. So we need to have a place for people to get on and off. There's the station building, and then there's access and how do people get to and from the station. I think what we've kind of set out is the maximum footprint that we would see based on trying to calibrate for all of those 3 components. Understanding that there's development plans here, there's also likely, it is probably the best option to ultimately have is both the transportation and development around it. That helps us, that helps the economic development for the city, that helps everybody. We're only looking to the transportation side of that equation. I think that's why the collaboration with you and with the property owners in these sites and I know some of them are here, so it's going to be important as we continue to move forward into the next phases of the project and as things change and advance. The kind of reason for looking towards a western side of the station for access and for the building site, which again is looking at a maximum footprint and stretching that towards El Camino, is partially because the current station, as it's currently designed, already has an imbalance of access, with most access coming from the east side, and looking to balance that out on the west side, and also getting closer for patrons using the station towards the plans that you guys have for continued growth along El Camino and the priority development area, and having better linkages between the Millbrae downtown and the station. Understanding that and you'll hear about the intermodal access study that's, I think, next on the agenda, so the work that's been done so far, and we're going to continue to look for input from that in terms of how do people get to the station, how should they get to the station, how should those plans advance. So I think that's the, I don't want to kind of call into, go before Adam in his presentation, but that is part of the work that we're continuing to engage with, and the city is a partner with us, and frankly, there's only 4 stations in our entire Northern California region. It's San Francisco, Millbrae, San Jose, and Gilroy. You guys are one of the most important places that we have in the entire system, and I know you're shaking your head, Councilmember Schneider, and so what I'm taking away from tonight is we need more engagement here. We need to be talking to you more than we have. So I hear that, I'm interested in that conversation. So I don't look at tonight as sort of like a one-off and then we disappear. I want to have that continued engagement with the city.
Well, I appreciate that sentiment, and I know you weren't here at the time, but 2 years ago we saw basically the same diagram in terms of the station layout, and we gave our feedback, and I know our staff has given feedback offline. So it's disappointing to see it presented the same way that it was 2 years ago when we were holding those public hearings about the developments right on that exact same property. I think in terms of parking, we certainly don't want a large parking lot there. That developer has proposed 4 levels of underground parking, which is more than the minimum required for the development. So that could be a potential opportunity if you need a certain number of parking spaces to work with that developer to reserve a certain number for high-speed rail if you're able to pitch in, because that's certainly a big cost to that project. But something, food for thought.
Absolutely. And if I can just answer on the parking question, and I realized there was a question about the historic depot previously that I didn't touch on, but for the parking question, the reason for the parking assumptions is that to build the 4th track, we displaced some of the Caltrain parking that is along here, and so all of this parking is basically replacement parking for the displacement. So that's the basis for it. We also touched this corner, and so this is the other piece of the parking. That is, again, a working assumption in order to have a footprint. We understand that there's probably better uses and there's probably better partnerships to be had here for how that actually looks. We're trying to have a place to mitigate the impact of removing the parking that's along the Caltrain line here. And then in terms of the historic depot, this is where it's currently been moved to from its original location, is this empty space here, and then we would propose to move it just right next to between this is California Drive and the tracks.
Okay, this running out of time. I don't think we're going to get to the Caltrain business plan. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak on this subject?
Mr. Mayor,
No?
I want to
Okay.
follow up.
Quickly, please.
Okay. Number one, Boris, I get this splendid system thing. Nobody's ever showed us that the current Caltrain electrification would actually reach 110 miles an hour using those existing tracks. You are required by law to have certain number of parking spaces within the station area.
There's no requirement. So we have to.
Well, we'll go back and look at that. This intermodal study, this is like the first we've ever seen of it, and I think this is Clearly, you're talking about tracks, platforms, station building, and access. Access is a nightmare right now. You keep mentioning community meetings, community outreach. I get all those have happened. The point is, no one's listening. We document, we send letters, we have for the last, 10 years. You go up and down all of San Mateo County, none of our messages are getting to the High-Speed Rail Board, and you will get written objections throughout this because that's what we've tried to do for the last 10 years, to tell you not to waste time or money anymore. Blended is not really going to work there. Yeah, great, I love it that Caltrain's going to be electrified, and that's wonderful for them. But for high-speed rail to work in a safe manner and to guarantee people access, it's going to have to be underground throughout this whole thing. You're not listening to us. We have meetings. I appreciate you're doing that, but nothing gets through to high-speed rail. You talk about safety. You talk about performance. You talk about access to transit already being imbalanced. Yeah, we know all that, and we've told you how it's going to work. It's not going to work as you're proposing. We've said that, as Councilmember Holliber has mentioned before. 2 years ago, 10 years ago, we've mentioned all of that. Yet you come here before us with recommendation A, recommendation B. And the cities throughout San Mateo County, who all want high-speed rail, have never once, we've not agreed to this. We have told the messenger that take it back to high-speed rail and let them know if you want all the things you've said, access to transit, safety, performance, all that stuff, it's only going to work underground. And that's what the original plan was. That's the way it's going to have to be. We keep
I think
talking.
You made your point. All right, so let's... Council member, thank you for coming up. I think it's just obvious we want to work together and work on these issues together. Obviously, there's a lot of conflicting wants and needs and practicality things, so the practical issues will dictate what's going to happen. So I look forward to working with your agency and yourself, and really appreciate you taking the time. And I know it was tough, and you handled it fine. Vice Mayor had a suggestion.